What's up, everyone? This is Upload Records Music News. This is where we slow things down, strip away the mythology, and talk honestly about music history. Today, we're revisiting one of the most argued, most rewritten, and most emotionally charged songwriting disputes in classic rock. Gene Simmons, Peter Criss, and the song that changed everything for Kiss, Beth. For decades, fans believed a simple story. Peter Criss wrote Beth. Peter sang it, and that was that. But Gene Simmons has gone out of his way repeatedly to correct what he calls a misconception. And the way he's done it has left a lot of people uncomfortable. Because in trying to erase a myth, Gene may have exposed a much bigger truth. Beth wasn't just another track on a Kiss album. Released on Destroyer in 1976, it became Kiss's biggest commercial hit in the United States. It reached number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100. It brought Kiss into living rooms that never would have touched a hard rock record. And it featured Peter Criss, not Gene Simmons, on lead vocals. That alone should tell you something. Now, Gene Simmons has said very clearly that Peter Criss did not write Beth. In interviews, including one with Professor of Rock, Gene explained that Peter once hummed a melody that caught his attention. That hummed line, according to Gene, became the foundation of the song. But then Gene goes further. He insists Peter had almost nothing to do with the actual writing. And then he makes the statement that has sparked outrage for years. Gene Simmons says Peter Criss does not write songs. He says Peter does not play a musical instrument. He says drums are not a musical instrument. They are a percussive instrument. Gene argues that because drums are percussive, nothing played on them can be copyrighted. No melody, no lyric, no ownership. He says you can copyright a riff, you can copyright a melody, you can copyright lyrics, but according to Gene Simmons, nothing you do on drums can stop someone else from copying it. That's his argument. He even adds that Peter, as far as he knows, plays no other instruments, no keyboards, no guitar, nothing. Except, in Gene's words, a great whiskey voice in the early days. Now here's where things start to crack, because Gene Simmons also admits something else. He admits Peter hummed the melody, and melody is music. In songwriting law, in publishing standards, and in real-world practice, humming a melody absolutely counts. It doesn't matter if it comes from a piano, a guitar, or someone's mouth. If you create the melody, you've created the song's spine. And Gene Simmons knows this. Yet he tries to minimize it by reframing authorship as technical ownership instead of creative origin. Then Gene introduces another name into the story, Stan Penridge. Stan Penridge played with Peter Criss in a band called Chelsea before Kiss ever existed. According to Gene, Stan Penridge is the true writer of Beth, along with songs like Baby Driver. Gene claims that through politics, Peter Criss ended up with his name appearing first in the songwriting credits. Peter Criss, Stan Penridge, sometimes Bob Ezrin. But Peter's name is first. And Gene says that wasn't earned. He flat out states that Peter had nothing to do with the song. Nothing, except singing it. And yet, Gene also admits it was producer Bob Ezrin who reshaped the song inspired by Yesterday. Strings, piano, a softer arrangement. Because, as Gene himself says, the melody demanded it. Think about that. The melody demanded it. The melody that Peter hummed. This is where the narrative collapses under its own weight. Kiss was never a democracy. Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley controlled the brand, the publishing, the press, and the story. Because he wasn't the loudest voice, he wasn't the most media savvy, and he certainly wasn't protected. So history became convenient. When Gene Simmons says Peter just hummed the melody, that isn't a dismissal. It's an admission. Because without that melody, there is no Beth. Without Peter's emotional delivery, there is no hit. Without his vulnerability, Kiss never crosses over the way it did. Kiss built its empire on characters, the demon, the star child, the spaceman. But Beth worked because it wasn't a character. It was human. And that humanity came from Peter Criss, not from publishing arguments, not from legal definitions, not from corporate mythology, from feeling. So here's the Upload Records takeaway. Humming a melody is writing. Emotional authorship is real authorship. And Gene Simmons' own words make that impossible to deny. This isn't about tearing Gene Simmons down. It's about correcting a narrative that keeps shrinking Peter Criss's role in one of rock's most important songs. Because without Peter Criss, there is no Beth. And without Beth, Kiss is a very different band. This has been Upload Records Music News. If you care about music truth, not mythology, hit like, subscribe, and let us know what you think. Was Peter Criss robbed? You decide.